Today on the Shrewd podcast, we're going to talk about what the media is not talking about, which is what's going on in the world. There's a lot of protests happening. I bet you didn't know that, but we're gonna cover some of the hidden stories that are not being covered. Then we're going to go back in North America and talk about two very funny little things that happened to regarding Joe Biden and Trudeau up here in Canada. But then back to the States, we're going to talk about how the U.S. Congress is going a little nuts, how good guys with guns actually do make a difference, and how the trans lobbyists are at it again, making all sorts of crazy new rules for everybody to follow. And in Canadian news, we're going to talk about how the COVID stuff is not done, not by a long shot, but more importantly, we're starting to fight back. We're getting some firefighters that are fighting back, and we're getting some pressure that's helping with AHS, and we're even getting Pat Kick loose. So you're not gonna want to miss this episode of the Shrewd podcast. I messed it up. Yeah, sorry.
It's okay. All right, we are back from a weekend of despair and villainy to have another Tuesday news day.
Super optimistic, this guy. Half glass full, always. Let's see. How you been?
There is no hope. No.
Spoken like a true Christian there.
Oh, sting me to my core.
That's right. That's the way. I got to keep you honest, man.
Oh, apparently.
Mm-hmm. How are you?
No, my weekend, like Saturday was pretty chill, just because we haven't been doing anything with Steph. Usually Saturdays we spend that with Steph's parents, but they've been out of commission with Steph's mom still healing.
Yeah, very injured.
And then Sunday afternoon I got fairly ticked.
You got a tick on you?
No, I got ticked because in Calgary, okay, you would probably, if I was to tell you what is the biggest, like most notable park in the city, what is it?
I'd say Fish Creek Park, Millshill Park.
Okay, like
Confederation Park?
a park that you can go and have a picnic.
There's a million of those. I don't know.
Biggest one.
More Park.
Biggest. Most popular.
Central Memorial Park. Princess Island Park.
Okay, Princess Island Park. Yeah, that is one. Okay, I'll give you that one. But I'm talking about Bowness.
Oh, okay. So many parks, man.
Okay, but Bowness is probably the most. It's definitely the most popular. It's the busiest. I know that, like, okay, when we were having our son's first birthday, this was like 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. In order to book even a small shelter for Bowness Park, you have to book it 9 months in advance.
Oh boy!
So we did not do that,
mm-hmm.
And so we're like, okay, what can we do? And they're like, well, you can have somebody go there as soon as the park opens, and you just sit at that table until people show up, and that's how you hold it. And
wow.
So that's what we did for Curtis's first birthday. And so we went to Bowness over the weekend,
mm-hmm.
and of course, it being relatively warm and lots of stuff to do in the water,
yep.
Then quite popular. The parking lot for Bowness is not accommodating for the amount of people that attend the park. And so I had to drop the kids off and Steph off, and then I had to go leave the park and drive like 3 blocks away to park, mm-hmm. and then walk back down. And I'm like, Bowness.
I want to find a different park in the future.
Well, and it's awkward to get to.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm like, why did we choose to go to Bowness?
Mm-hmm.
Like, Bowness is the most awkward park to get to because there's only 2 ways that you can get to Bowness Park. There's Stony Trail, and there's Highway 1.
Yep.
Or at least close to Highway 1.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why did we come here?
It's like you're like a glutton for punishment. It's like
well,
the Lake
I did not choose this.
Oh.
If I was to choose a park to go to for a picnic,
Mhm.
I'm like, why would we have to stay in the city? I'm like, let's go to Airdrie. It's way less crowded.
Yeah, there's also a million parks in Calgary.
Yeah, there's a lot of parks.
Like I showed in the endless list of parks that I was giving you. I'm like, there's a lot.
Kudos to you for knowing a bunch of parks.
Thank you.
Yeah, but
I know my city.
Yes, I would not have been able to name like the parks that I know in the city.
Mm-hmm.
I know Boness. I know Confed. Mm-hmm. I know Prairie Winds Park.
Yeah.
I know Tuxedo.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty much my repertoire of parks.
That's not even a big one either.
It's not.
Like a pretty small park.
It's a pretty small park.
Yeah. There's like a million parks out there, man.
Yep.
You just gotta find them. But
yes,
for me, I so originally I was supposed to go to Lake Louise yesterday, but I found out that Lake Louise is basically the bonus of like Banff Parks.
Yep.
It's like good luck getting in there unless you get there like the crack of dawn or you book a bus or shuttle like a month in advance or whatever. So we ended up going to the Legacy Trail, which is between Banff and Canmore. And I took two very enthusiastic little teenagers, and the way there was great. On the way back, we got rained out, so we're biking in like some pretty gnarly.
This was on Sunday.
This is yesterday, Monday. I took the day off so I could take them. Yeah, it was fun. I just posted the pictures on Facebook.
Yeah, I noticed that you posted the pictures, but I didn't. I thought you had done it on like Sunday.
No, because we went yesterday.
Yeah, we probably should have been rained out at work. Well, it wasn't nearly as severe as I was thinking it was going to be yesterday. Yesterday was like thunderstorms, and then there was nothing. It was like it's spitting and like, and yeah, we had kind of a crud day yesterday.
Yeah, wasn't as bad as like Medicine Hat. They got walloped.
Yes, they did get walloped.
But yeah, let's go into the first story.
Let's talk about the stories instead of talking about our personal lives.
Oh, of course,
So,
let's talk about what happened with the Federalists bringing up.
Here's why the media don't want you to know about the massive protests going on around the globe. This is from the Federalist. Discontent with left-wing policy failures is triggering massive protests all around the world. Just don't expect to read about it in the New York Times. If you skim the front pages of major corporate news outlets, you'll find no mention of the economic protests raging in Spain, Morocco, Greece, and the United Kingdom.
Quick question. Did you actually know about those?
No, I didn't.
I knew the one about the United Kingdom, and I knew one about that happened down in Panama. And I know about some in Germany, but I didn't know about these. So it's
I knew we of course know about the ones in the Netherlands, but I didn't know about the other ones.
Yeah.
So on the Washington Post homepage, you'll find headlines such as "How to deal with a chatty coworker who won't get out of your office," but you won't find any mention of the more than 100,000 people protesting in Madrid. You'll find the story of a gay union entitled "What's Two Yentas plus One Senator a Lifetime Together" at the New York Times, but you won't see a single heading on the more than 10,000 protesters in Athens. Corporate media has largely glossed over the tens of thousands of farmers in the Netherlands who clogged up roadways and distribution centers by holding up Canadian truckers' convoy-style demonstrations to protest radical climate policies. According to the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, which records protests worldwide, 11 countries are currently seeing protests of more than 1,000 people in response to the rising cost of living and other economic woes in 2022. As of July 5th, they had recorded protests of more than 120,000 people in France, 100,000 in Spain, 10,000 in Greece, 10,000 in Kazakhstan, 10,000 in Sri Lanka, 10,000 in India, 5,000 in Iran, 5,000 in Peru, 1,000 people in Argentina, 1,000 in Morocco, and 1,000 in the UK. When vaccine passports were being implemented, protests took place around the world, but there was hardly any coverage from the media. Due to the cost of living crisis, protests are happening around the world, but again, the media turns a blind eye. So this is just... That's very loud, sorry. Yeah. It's very akin to what we saw last year during a lot of the protests, and what we saw earlier this year when it came to protests that happened around the country involving the truckers.
It's pretty incredible, like what's going on though, because like obviously this story. So if I'm just kind of glancing through the story a little bit, So the first story that it covers is France. So the first paragraph talks about France and all the protests going on there, and the crazy things going on. Then it goes on to Spain, and all the protests going on there. They're going to the streets. They're going hard. Then it's Greece. Then it's Morocco. I think it's the next one, and then Argentina and United Kingdom,
Yeah,
Morocco,
a whole bunch of different places.
But the big thing too is that, I'm hearing stories about Panama. Panama's doing some crazy protests. Germany, they're doing a whole bunch of protests in solidarity with the Dutch farmers.
Yeah.
Italy is having a massive amounts of protests as well. This is happening worldwide. It's pretty crazy, actually. I was like, the amount of radio silence from the North American media is pretty glaring, actually.
Yep.
I mean, I do see these stories come up in a lot of these alternative news sources, like the Counter Signal does a lot of them. They're doing great work with that. Sky News, in Australia, is covering a lot of these, but they're literally not being touched on at all. Obviously, the reason is because it seems very likely is because obviously every government, particularly in North America, wants to avoid any kind of populist uprising or populist kind of rhetoric. This has been the norm, but that it's not that they don't want any kind of revolution. It's that they want the right kind.
Yeah,
and they don't want to detract from the revolutions of choice. So in the U.S., the revolutions that they want to stoke are the abortion revolutions, and we'll talk about that in a
and the
while.
BLM revolutions
And the BLM ones, like BLM, abortion. Those are the only revolutions that you're allowed to popularize.
Yeah.
But any kind of revolution, any kind of talk about what's going on in the world and how the governments are literally targeting and destroying their own people, those are not allowed. And so it's a good story to really show you there's more going on in the world. So if you're only listening to regular Canadian news media like Global News, CBC or whatever, and you listen to American media I don't know, I don't even know if Fox News is covering that much. Maybe they are, but definitely MSNBC, ABC, none of them are going to cover it. You may not have known that there is basically a gigantic revolution movement. This is kind of like what happened in, what do they call it in the Mediterranean, Stephen? A wave of protest that swept across the Arab world. It was the uprising, or do you remember what you want to talk about?
Nope.
Where Algeria, Tunisia, Egypt, they all had these big, huge revolution. I think it was maybe it was Arab Spring, something like that. But it was it was a string of uprisings that basically spread and they all kind of combined together and led to a humongous wave of protests and overthrows of a lot of governments. And this kind of seems like what's going on around the world, because right now the British government, Boris Johnson's out because of a lot of the pushback from the people. Sri Lankan government, that the president there is out. He's definitely out because people were in his pool. He didn't want to go back.
They burned out his house.
They burned out his house. Then in Italy, the government that was in charge in Italy lost all popular support from the other governments, so they lost their coalitions, and so they're now being forced to basically step down. So these are not just random protests that are having no impact; they're actually changing governments.
Yeah.
So these are pretty substantive movements. Even Rex Murphy recognized in the great piece that he did in the National Post, he recognized that if what's happening in the Netherlands was happening here, to the same extent, our government would be imploding, because our government installed the emergency powers for way less than what the Dutch are doing. So yeah, so that's
anyways
stuff.
Yeah. So some brief brevity before we move on with more serious stories.
Oh, I thought this was so funny.
Yes, it is. So, place where Biden face planted off bike is named Brandon Falls on Google Maps.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Brandon Falls.
You can find it right now.
In Jazzy.
Oh, it's not in Jersey, in Delaware.
No, Delaware. Oh,
It's in Delaware.
No, I was too high up because Atlantic City's in Jersey. I sometimes get confused when I zoom in too far.
I don't know if you can see that. I'm looking it up right now. Brandon Falls. And it comes right up. 300, lose Delaware.
Yep. Anyways, so someone has managed to place a landmark in the Delaware location, naming it after the infamous Let's Go Brandon chant, which was initiated after the White House claimed NASCAR fans were not chanting F Joe Biden when they totally were. At the time of writing, Brandon Falls is still listed as a historical landmark on Google Maps. Search Brandon Falls.
So
right
great.
There.
That's where our illustrious former vice president, Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Oh,
is this a good place for falling off your bike while shaking hands with your sycophants? There's nowhere better. People are ruthless.
So good.
Yeah. So that's poking fun at.
Well, hold on. Can you go down to like the actual comments that they screenshotted, the reviews? Because there's people who actually made reviews of this. They actually they did a whole thing on the reviews. So go down to the reviews.
Okay.
Some of the reviews were
okay.
brilliant.
5 stars. Must see destination reminder of what's really going on. They're a nice place to ride a bike. Be careful not to cause too much inflation in your tires. You could end up crashing. But if that happens, just blame Putin. People will fall for it.
No, it's very true.
Some say if you look closely, you can see the dementia from a mile away. Wonderful place, better than Niagara Falls, a true hysterical landmark. Came across this place by accident on my bicycle, noticed a small oil slick or patch of the site might have been added there by a Saudi for effect. Get your ice cream there as well, but leave your kids at home. Better than Disneyland, an all-around good time reliving the experience on my own tricycle. Can't wait to go back, but if you're planning on visiting, it's starting to get a little touristy, so if you might want to get up close to the actual spot, better go to move on. All right, and then one more.
My favorite comment here is Diane Badner-Tomac. She says, great tacos and ice cream, not kid-friendly.
Yeah.
Oh, boy. or this one from S'more. Yeah, I don't know the name. I remember when Brandon did the, the thing. It was magical. I will never remember it.
Yeah.
People. These are the times where people on the internet make me just crack up.
Yeah, it's good.
Great.
So, yeah. And then, of course, here's our Prime Minister being...
This was an actual news segment.
Yeah.
Hair today, gone tomorrow. Justin Trudeau's new, much shorter haircut.
Oh. I can't even do it.
We can only go to a commercial.
No, we're gonna get it.
No, we got it.
It's compared to Jim Carrey's bowl cut in Dumb and Dumber.
He just can't stop.
You can't stop.
All right, we can do this.
I couldn't do this.
No, you can't do this.
Yeah.
So basically, it's
pretty solid.
So you can see that if somebody deep faked Trudeau's face on like classic classic scenes from like Dumb and Dumber, and it looks so funny with like the gap tooth and all that. It was so good.
Yep. All right. Enough brevity. Serious story time.
Oh, let's do it.
Okay. Minneapolis Mom confronts BLM protesters after apartment shooting. Not a George Floyd situation. So, Minneapolis Mom, was captured on video Saturday confronting Black Lives Matter activists who congregated in her neighborhood to protest the fatal police shooting of a gunman she claimed tried to kill her and her children. Arabella Foss-Yarbrough called police last Wednesday night after neighbor Andrew Teckle Sundberg allegedly fired his gun into her home as she cooked her kids' dinner, leaving bullet holes in her front door, walls, and above her bathroom sink. 2 Minneapolis police snipers shot him dead Thursday morning after a long standoff. A pistol with an extended magazine and several bullet casings was found in his apartment. This is not a George Floyd situation. George Floyd was unarmed. This is not okay. She launched at the protesters who gathered for a march.
That's not what a black woman would sound like. It'd be like, this is not no George Floyd situation. George Floyd was unarmed. This is not okay. That's more like a black woman.
Okay, then. Well, I was just going to let her do the talking for herself.
If you are idols because you guys are celebrating his life.
It was a terror. I'm sure it was a
This
terror.
is not okay.
You're alive.
It's not okay.
Shut up.
You guys need to just let it go. grief in silence. This is not okay. This is not a George Floyd situation. George Floyd was unarmed. He was unarmed.
You're alive!
This is not okay. My kids have to deal with this and probably have a mental illness now because they almost lost their life. There's bullet holes in my kitchen because he sat in the fucking hallway watching my move.
Yep.
Poor lady.
All the heckling comments. All the heckling comments. There are bullet holes in my kitchen. Not in you, though.
Ugh.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, he failed in his attempt to kill me by shooting up my house.
It's like that stuff that we see from like climate activists all the time. They don't give a crap what kind of damage or harm. Remember that video we saw like 2 weeks ago, like where the climate activists like block a highway, and then that guy who like was like gonna be rearrested because he's not gonna fulfill his parole.
Yeah.
He was like pissed, right? And they didn't care. None of them care. They're all about doing their little protest. Couldn't care less about the damage or harm they're doing. This is the problem: is that whenever somebody who is the proper victim, they get like obviously like when the proper victim, like the proper victim group, gets hit, and then it's outrage. Everyone's freaking out, and everyone's talking about like, oh, this poor person. But if it's somebody who's not the victim group or the favored class, suddenly it's like, oh, shut up, be quiet. You're fine.
Well, because if you look at it, it's like, okay, well, the shooter, Teckle, shooting into Foss Yarborough's house is black on black crime. And so, of course, BLM ignores it. The media ignores it. But the police shooting a black man is absolutely unacceptable in any circumstance. It doesn't matter what it is. Mm-hmm. Even though he was involved in what they say is a 6-hour standoff with police until he was sniped. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's not okay because it was the police that shot him. Mm-hmm. This is the insanity of BLM. The head of BLM, Traherne Cruz, joined the mass to call for transparency from the police. We're demanding the release of body cam footage. The release of body cam footage of the sniper that took him out? Are you what?
There's no body cam footage.
They're not going to catch anything from the body cam footage. The body cam footage of the officers that are shooting back and forth with him from his house. You want that? It's like, the problem is that even with the body cam footage where it's very clear that this guy, like they were trying to talk him down, trying to stop him from shooting back and forth with them, and he kept shooting them. And they would still say, well, you could have done more. You can't do anything more. These people are dangerous, and they're a clear and present danger to society. And unfortunately, in these situations like this, when every other method is exhausted, you have to put the guy down.
Yeah, and this goes back to the trend right now in the United States where criminals are being treated with kid gloves, right? Like a lot of like dangerous criminals are being like they get arrested, they get charged, but then they're right back on the street like in no time. Whereas like the victims are almost always ignored and aren't really given any justice. So
this is probably one of the most interesting lines. So the woman, because she knew that it would gain her favor, she was yelling back and forth with the protesters. I have black children. I am a woman of color. If I would have lost my life, would you guys do this for me? Yes, ma'am, Cruz said. Except, you know that they... Like, it depends on who shot her. If it was Teckle, no way.
No way.
They would shove it under the rug just like they do all the black on black crime that happens in Chicago, New York, LA, everywhere across the United States, because it's an unfortunate reality that black on black crime is the highest subgroup of crime in America.
Well, there was that one cop in one of the BLM riots, like the big 2021s, a retired police officer or whatever. I don't know if he was a chief or something, but he got shot. He got killed by BLM protesters, and the media totally downplayed it. Like they almost like pretended like it didn't even happen because he happens to be inconvenient to the whole cause. But like that's an example of, okay, he's a black person killed by somebody like a BLM activist, it's like, well, they just memory hold that, right? So like the idea that this woman could get any justice or any kind of like any kind of attention, they're just saying that. It sounds like they're just saying that just to kind of like I don't know, give her what she wants to hear. But I don't think that they really mean it, because they're only there because like the BLM, the BLM is anti-police. That's the only reason I think that they're doing this. So it's sad. It's sad. It's sad because it's just more of the same kind of thing, where people are just being treated like like pawns in this bigger game. Yep, which is too sad.
And if if you're suffering and you're against the narrative, then it doesn't matter. As long as if you are not supporting their narrative, they couldn't care less what happens to you. Whereas if you are for their narrative, they'll support you in any circumstance. But and it doesn't matter what you do. If you do something good, they will not promote you. They will not extol you. Just like this individual, reported by the Daily Wire. What we know about the heroic 22-year-old man who stopped a mass shooting in Indiana. 22-year-old man with a gun stopped a mass shooting in an Indiana mall on Sunday, saving countless lives, according to authorities. He fatally shot the active shooter, and he has been identified as Elijah?
Yeah, it's basically Elijah.
Elisha. Okay. Dickin, here's what we know about the young man. Dickin was at the mall with his girlfriend when the shooter opened fire on unsuspecting shoppers in the mall at Greenwood, about 15 miles south of Indianapolis. Within 2 minutes of the first shot, Dickens used his 9mm Glock to fire for at least 10 rounds and kill the shooter. I will say his actions were nothing short of heroic, Greenwood Police Chief Jim Eisen said of Dickin. Greenwood Park Mall surveillance footage captured nearly the entire incident. He engaged the gunman with quite a distance with a handgun, was very proficient, very technically sound as he moved to close in on the suspect. He was also motioning for people to exit behind him. He was carrying the Glock legally. He did not have a permit, according to Newsweek, but per the Indiana constitutional carry law effective July 1st, he did not require one. So, this is great.
The other thing I thought was interesting to notice, a little bit down there, it says the mall that he was at has
a no gun policy.
But as the Indiana Star said, this creates no legal challenges. Basically, yeah, if they ask him not to leave because he has a gun on him, then legally they can charge him with they can trespass. That's the only impact that has. But you can still have a gun. You're not required to disclose or to do.
This would have easily been a devastating tragedy in a gun-free zone if Dickin had actually been following their so-called rules.
Yeah.
But because he was violating the rules, whether known or unknowns to him, because of that, he was allowed to save far more lives than would have been taken.
Yeah. There was that, remember that shooting that happened a couple of weeks ago in, was it Norway? Or was it?
Oh, yeah, the one where the guy walked through the mall?
He walked through the mall with his long gun or something like that.
Yeah, I think that
Denmark.
was in
Denmark. Denmark. Yeah, you're right. Denmark. So, again, that was an example of a guy, unchallenged, can go around shooting anybody he wants, and like the death toll is pretty, can be pretty crazy.
Yep.
Here, the guy had started his attack, but this guy basically cut him short. This is why we like, and actually, like, there's a story that's similar to this that we haven't covered, but somebody asked Kathy Hochul, is that the governor of,
interim governor of New York? Yes.
Yeah. So Kathy Hochul, somebody asked her, can you give us any stats or any numbers to show that legally registered gun owners are more dangerous than other people? Because what they were trying to show is that pound for pound, statistically, people who actually own guns and actually are registered firearms owners
are far safer.
Are the safest and most law-abiding people you can get of everyone in society. So they were trying to make that point. And this is another good example because they try to make guns the boogeyman. But if you go through the process and you actually try to follow the rules and all that properly, you're actually probably going to be one of the most safe people with the gun. Like, I know that when I was younger, I used to believe all the propaganda on TV. Like even The Simpsons, they had that episode where Homer got a gun, and basically they try to imply that like all these dumb idiots will keep they'll get a gun, put it in the vegetable crisper, and kids won't be able to get it. I'm like, yes, if you're a total idiot and you're totally responsible, you shouldn't have that gun. But most gun owners
are totally responsible.
Are very responsible. They know exactly what the rules and the laws are, and they follow them very well. So, in this case, this is a great example of what we try to encourage, that people with guns, basically, they're almost like the next best thing to having a security guard or an officer. Because a police officer, it'll take them time to get there. But if you happen to have people walking around the mall, on scene with a gun, that can respond instantly, unless the gun owner knows.
Like, how quick was it? It was
2 minutes, I think it said.
Within 2 minutes of the first shot, he killed him.
Yeah. And again, 10 rounds. Remember how Biden won 10 guns
to limit
10 rounds? I mean, like, that's the thing. If you're a proficient gun owner, you realize guns like handguns are not super accurate, especially at long distances.
Oh yeah.
So you need multiple shots to be able to successfully take down somebody else. So all this works together. I've become a very pro-gun person later in life. Now that I know all the facts, it's pretty obvious that guns
I'm a
are
farm boy. I was always pro-gun.
Yeah, but
I grew up shooting.
I bought all the propaganda. I bought the propaganda from Bowling for Columbine. Was it called? Yeah, like that was a very anti-gun kind of documentary. Oh, yeah. There's a lot of them, but they're all filled with misinformation. And so I'm glad I got more informed. And I think if you
fixed your life,
I fixed my life. Unfortunately, Trudeau wants to ban all guns here, so that sucks.
Yeah. Well, that's what happens when you have insane government power, just like the Democrats want to give to their partisans on the Supreme Court.
Dude, you're just rocking the transitions today, man.
House Democrats tout bill to add 4 seats to the Supreme Court. The group of House Democrats called for legislation on Monday that would add 4 seats to the Supreme Court, lamenting an ultra-right-wing branch that just overturned the Roe v. Wade decision on abortion rights. There is no right to abortion.
Also called court packing.
Yep. So the 8 lawmakers cited recent Supreme Court decisions that rolled back Miranda rights throughout a New York gun control law and allowed religion to surface in schools, as well as the Dobbs v. Jackson women's health decision that overturned the right to abortion. There is no right to abortion in Roe, saying there was a need to add a new justice or new justices to the court. Representative Hank Johnson, Democrat, Georgia, the lead sponsor of the 2021 Judiciary Act, called the current makeup of the Supreme Court a Supreme Court at crisis with itself and with our democracy, where basic freedoms are under assault from the 6-3 conservative supermajority on the bench.
You know, they didn't really complain about the Supreme Court being
supermajority for the Democrats back in 2013.
Oh, they were totally fine with it then. But now that it's now they switch and there's a more conservative court, and we followed all the rules. The Democrats always they're like, we don't like the rules, so we're changing the rules now. That's how they play. They're like, no, we don't like the rules because they're not serving us. We're gonna cheat. So they're a bunch of cheaters.
Oh yeah, totally. So facing Republican opposition and some Democratic skepticism, the bill has little chance of becoming law, but it illustrates the deep anger amongst progressive Democrats about the court's direction under the 3 conservative justices nominated by former President Trump, Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett. Those 3 justices have radically altered the direction of the court, which now has twice as many conservative justices as liberal ones. Oh my gosh.
It's the end of the world as we know it.
As they know it.
As they know it.
Which is why some House representatives, instead of trying to push harder to, convince the public to accept what they say is true and reasonable, there are some members of the squad that decide to go crazy. Smirking AOC and Ilhan Omar are arrested outside SCOTUS during Roe v. Wade protest and then mock cops by pretending they've been cuffed. Squad members are amongst 34 nabbed for blocking traffic. She was seen walking escorted away by police with her hands crossed behind her back as if she were in handcuffs, but she was not. Yeah. Others arrested included Representative Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley, Cori Bush, Bonnie Watson-Coleman, and Catherine Clark. A total of 34 arrests, 16 of them members of Congress, were made at the demonstration Tuesday, according to Capitol Police.
You know what's really funny? Two things. One is that people are comparing AOC to like Jussie Smollett. Because the only reason you would walk with your hands behind your back is...
Yeah, so she's holding her hands behind her back. Yeah,
and then she puts her hand up. She puts her hand up.
Yeah.
Oh my,
my goodness, this woman.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but that's what the current Democrat makeup of the House is. It's just stupid.
That thing, that little move that she did where she like takes her hand and puts it up and all that, it just makes you think of that scene from Who Framed Roger Rabbit, where Roger's in handcuffs, and at one point he's like, pulls his hand out, goes to get something else, puts it right back in. It's like, you can take your hands out of the cuff at any time. It's like, not at any time, only when it's funny. It's like, that's basically like Ilhan. Oh, sorry, AOC. She's basically like she has a reputation of being a sensationalist and of always just like trying to do everything for show. Great example was when at the border, when the whole crisis supposedly about like the kids in cages, she went down to the border and she was like freaking out and crying and breaking down at the fence. And then people actually showed like pictures that show everything. I'd be like, she's nowhere near anywhere even close to like the actual like place. Mm-hmm. It was a photo op. So this lady is she's a con artist. Well, actually a scam artist more than anything else.
Oh yeah.
The other one was when she was at the Capitol during the so-called insurrection, and she went on Instagram and said like, I was like afraid for my life. People were banging on the door and they were gonna kill me. And they're like, that was the Capitol Police. They're just checking to make sure you're okay. Like they were trying to kill you. Mm-hmm.
No, this picture right here is just like the embodiment of stupid in America.
Yeah.
Yeah, right there.
Well, it's the embodiment of evil, really.
Oh, it is.
You have to remember, too, these are elected representatives in the House of Commons. Okay? Oh, not the House of Commons, the House of Representatives. They're, like, regular people have to protest because that's how you affect change. Because you're not an elected representative. But these women are in Congress. Their job is to actually create laws to change things up, to actually convince and be convincing and help other people see like what needs to be done. But instead, they're just going out there and just they're just putting on a show. Like these are very self-centered and very ineffectual people. Like they can't make an argument, so it's all a show to them. Mm-hmm. It's really sad to see like how this is how Democrats are, in that they have no intention of convincing anyone. It's all about power. It's all about like it's all performance, and it's just really sad to see how bad the things are in the States.
Yeah, it's just bonkers. Bonkers.
That is a solid like response, man. I like it.
Yeah, but unfortunately, going bonkers is not limited to Congress. It's also spreading out to organizations like the NCAA. So, trans swimmer Leah Thomas nominated for NCAA Woman of the Year. The University of Pennsylvania athlete shot to fame earlier this year when he became the first trans NCAA champion in Division I history. Mm-hmm. So, the University of Pennsylvania has nominated transgender swimmer Leah Thomas for their NCAA Woman of the Year award, the American College Sports Regulating Body has said. Thomas shot to fame earlier this year when he became the first one to win this, after winning the women's 500-yard freestyle in March, and he had hoped to compete for a place at the Olympics. That would be embarrassing for the United States. Mm-hmm. It would be a devastating thing for reality. Mm-hmm. Soon after, he became the focus of a raging debate when the swimming world's governing body voted last month to restrict the participation of transgender athletes in elite swimming competitions, which is good. Thomas competed on Penn's men team for 3 years before transitioning and then moving to the women's team, setting multiple program records. Yeah, this is just stupid.
I think like Megyn Kelly, she had a really, really great segment talking about this, and she was pissed. Let's say, like, because if you're a woman, this is basically somebody
it's a
stealing
slap in the
all
face.
opportunities. Just slap in the face to you. Like the people who are accomplished, like obviously Megyn Kelly is a very accomplished journalist and TV personality. Then there was like that tennis player, it's a very famous, now retired, tennis player, and she's been pushing back against this a lot and getting a lot of flack for it. But you know what, like the trans activists remind me of? They remind me of like the Queen of Hearts from like Alice in Wonderland. That everyone has to play the game. Everyone has to participate. You're not allowed to like pretend that you don't want to play.
Yeah.
Or
and if anybody does oppose, then it's off with their speech.
Off with their heads. And that's the problem. Is like you're. It's not enough to just accept or tolerate them. Like you're required to tolerate and include them and all that. Yeah. But now you have to actively participate. You have to say the lines. You have to follow along. You have to use the pronouns. You have to play along. It's a game, and everyone has to play. And if you don't play, you're in serious trouble. And right now, there's an interesting thing going on right now that we're noticing, and this has been across several platforms. Matt Walsh talked about how the Merriam-Webster dictionary changed the definition of female to actually it was like someone who identifies as such but is not a male.
Dang it! I thought I.
What?
Hold on. Pause. Okay. Yeah. No, I just had to source a story, and it's not this one. It's this one. Merriam-Webster changes the definition of female. So the online dictionary has caved to the trans agenda in order to appease woke activists. The dictionary publisher has added a secondary definition of female that defines the term as having gender identity that is opposite of male. The key term here is gender identity, which demonstrates that Merriam-Webster maintains that gender is not directly connected to sex. A female is a woman. Trans-identifying males are not female. However, according to trans activists, men can be women. That's not the only part of the definition that is changed in the online edition of Merriam-Webster. Notice the primary definition of female, of relating to or being the sex that typically has the capacity to bear young or produce eggs. In Merriam-Webster's 10th edition, the dictionary defines the noun female as of relating to or being the sex that bears young or produces eggs. The change in the online edition to include the phrase typically has the capacity shows their attempt to include trans-identifying males in the definition of female. While this phrase may refer to women who cannot bear children due to infertility, given the nod to gender identity in defining the word female, it is most likely another way to appease the trans community.
Okay, I just noticed something. Can you actually look up go to Merriam-Webster right now?
Yep.
Just go to Merriam-Webster itself. I just noticed something that's really interesting because when I saw the definition, I was like, I wonder if they did this, and I think that they did. So obviously, you're right. Like the definition of female is having a gender identity that's the opposite of male. But then look up male. Look up the word male. Now look up the the B, like the definition B.
Having a gender identity that is the opposite of female.
It's a circular argument.
Yep.
That's what they've done. They basically they defined it by not defining it. It's like, what is a dog? Well, it's definitely not a cat. Okay, what is a cat? Well, it's definitely not a dog. It's like,
one of the interesting things is, of course, Merriam-Webster, in trying to appease the trans wokeists, they have essentially established that gender is binary.
Yeah.
Because you can't say, oh, well, there are a zillion genders if it's the opposite of male. And it's like, well, the only one that's the opposite is female. Because all these other genders don't exist.
They've created a binary.
Yep, they have. So,
which means that pretty soon they're going to be
coming update. To cancel Merriam. Well, they'll be coming to cancel Merriam-Webster, or they'll do another update. But they'll have to continually do updates to try and appease the woke activists, to try and appease the gender-confused, insane folks, because they're even coming for our history. Gender activists seek to prevent identifying human remains as male and female. So activists attempting to tear down the so-called gender binary are now coming for archaeology, the scientific study of human history and prehistory, through the analysis of artifacts and remains. An essential practice in archaeology is to determine the sex of human remains through measurements of the skeleton's pelvis, skull, and other sexually dimorphic traits. This is important for understanding many cultural and functional ways societies structured themselves according to gender roles. They want to disrupt, activists now want to disrupt this essential classification process, arguing that since we don't know how these skeletons may have self-identified in life, it is immoral to assign them genders in the present. In their imagination, individuals born hundreds of years ago may have identified as something other than their biological sex. Yeah,
that didn't exist back then. That was not a thing.
So Emma Palladino, a master's degree student at the University of Montreal, well, of course it's Montreal,
they should definitely revoke her, like any accreditation they have over her.
Yeah. Over the recent 4th of July holiday, to write, you might know the argument that the archaeologists who find your bones one day will assign you the same gender that you had at birth. So regardless of whether you transition, you can't escape your assigned sex. Let me tell you why that's BS. In a now private Twitter thread, Palladino explained her strange belief that scientists are assigning human remains a gender identity instead of simply observing and recording their sex. While archaeologists might identify a set of remains as probably female, it's understood the gender of an individual is never necessarily the same as their sex, and that gender is a whole spectrum we've barely begun to unpack. Oh my gosh, you're crazy, lady.
This is how they do it. They basically throw mud. They throw mud in the water and mix it up, make it all muddy. So you're like, you see, it's unclear. That's why we can't,
Probably female. Probably female.
Oh,
utter nonsense. Yeah. This is, well, and like this is why like they come after us for using certain terms like groomer, and then they get mad when they think we're attributing it to all of them. This is an interesting story, I will say. So subreddit bans the word groomer, claiming it's an anti-LGBTQ plus slur. Last week, the operators of the Political Compass memes subreddit announced that they have been contacted by Reddit administrators in regards to certain words used by their over 500,000 members that were unpalatable to their cause. Amongst them was the term groomer, often used to refer to someone who seeks to indoctrinate children in far-left gender identity ideology. The move is slammed by LGBT group Gays Against Groomers, which suggests Reddit went the wrong way in deeming the term to be an anti-LGBTQ plus slur. It is. It's not a slur, though. It's inaccurate.
It's not a slur. It's a very popular. Okay, like I remember, Charlie Kirk and a whole bunch of other people talked about it. They said like the reason they hate it is because it's so effective.
Yeah,
because it's changing a lot of people's minds about what's really going on. It's a very accurate term, and they hate it because it's so accurate and because it's so popular and because it catches so much traction. So how do you shut down a term that is being successfully used to expose the trans and gay and left agenda? You turn it into this swear word that you're no longer allowed to say. You make it taboo. That's the only thing that they can do. They don't want to get into a conversation about whether or not grooming is happening because that's uncomfortable and they don't like where that's going to go. So they'll just turn it into a word.
Yep. So from this group, we've been contacted by the admins, the operator said in a post, urging members to tone back your language and make a shift away from certain types of memes. It's necessary for the survival of the subreddit and preservation of our culture to open to all funny colors. 1984, we know. But it's either we ask you or we willingly allow a small minority of the subreddit to ruin the funny colors for everyone. Amongst the directives were no portraying LGBTQ people as a whole as groomers or pedophiles, calling them a slur or dead naming them, no portraying them being transgender as a mental illness. According to the directive, saying groomer or to refer to LGBTQ people will result in removal from the subreddit and possibly even a ban. Members shot back at the new rules, with one suggesting that the admins be portrayed as soy jacks to show how unbased they are.
What's a soy jack?
I think it's a soy boy, but it's like a different way of saying it.
Okay, that's cool. I like that.
Yeah. So upon hearing the news, Gays Against Groomers released a Twitter statement outlining their opposition. So For immediate release, Gays Against Groomers opposes Reddit's decision to ban the word groomer as an anti-LGBTQ slur. Mm-hmm. They stand firmly against Reddit's decision to censor the word groomer, equating the word groomer as an inherently anti-LGBTQ slur, asserts that LGBTQ automatically implies groomer, which is an insult to the millions of us within the community who strongly oppose the sexualization and ideological indoctrination of children. By banning this word from their platform, they're not only inadvertently expressing their support for the grooming and abuse of children, but also paints our community as a whole as those who support and engage in it. We find that reprehensible and offensive. Yeah, unfortunately, Gays Against Groomers is a very small minority of the LGBTQ.
Yeah, they're like the actual, like, you know, somewhat reason, like intelligent, intellectually honest.
They are. Well, like, I would say probably the representation and the ratio of gays against groomers compared to the normal LGBTQ plus crowd, which is totally accepted and finds transing the kids and sexualizing the children at an early age should be totally acceptable, is essentially akin to the regular Protestant community and the Westboro Baptists. The Westboro Baptists are a very, very small minority, but they get a lot of attention. Mm-hmm. And they would support a lot of things which most Christians would not.
Well, this is like, you know, a perfect example of what's really going on in our world. One of the big problems is free speech is dying.
Oh, yeah.
And this is a great example of how this is like a completely arbitrary decision by people with power who really like are just using their power for abuse. Like there's, I remember watching. I was rewatching the movie. What was it called?
Danny, your video.
My video gone?
Yeah,
oh,
your video is gone. I did not notice because I was
not
focused. Yes, you're back.
Okay, so I was rewatching just like the second half of like Deadpool 2.
I was actually watching that recently too.
And the funny thing is, that boy in that story, that featured in that story, he's basically a kid who was given way too much power, and he's too angry and hurt, and he wants to use that power and abuse it.
Yeah.
This is what happens when you have people in positions of power, like in Reddit. They basically say, I have the power, but they have a worldview or a framework that basically says, okay, I don't. I'm going to abuse my power and pick sides and go down hard on the ones that I don't like, or they want to like virtue signal and be like, you see, I'm being a good ally, not realizing the implications of their decisions, because what they're doing, they may feel like they're doing the right thing and be like, oh, we're protecting this group, but really what they're doing, they're contributing to a complete and total development of any kind of conversation, any kind of respectful talk, and just going into like the cancel button. You're canceled, picking sides. That's what Twitter did. Twitter decided, they picked sides. They said, we're siding with the dead naming and the pronouns. Yeah. And we're basically making a decision. But they claimed that we're unbiased. Like, no, you made a decision. Being unbiased would be, we're not going to take a position on this either way, and we're just going to police you all equally for like bullying and language, but we're not going to make a decision. So it's kind of like the trend and how this is going. So
yep.
All right.
Yeah. Speaking of trends, like they say, if you want to have a conspiracy theory that goes to the truth, wait 6 months. This is a very good example of that. COVID-19 vaccines affected 42% of women's menstrual cycles, study shows. So the vaccines.
I hate to say you told you to, but we told you so.
Yep. See, there was a story that we considered talking about today, and I'm considering having it be the name of the episode because Matt Walsh was great about this. It was about this whole Sesame Street incident.
Oh yeah,
where this mother was like, "Oh my gosh, like the actor who portrays this puppet was racist because she apparently, according to this 3-second clip, was saying no, I don't want to give the children a hug or something," which was it was silly because it was like, well, you clearly edited this video to like try and find this moment. And it's like, yep, you're clearly whining and nobody really cares. And then Matt Walsh finished up with S, because of course Sesame Street does the whole like letters. It's like B is for balloon. And Matt Walsh's S is for shut the hell up. I'm like,
I like how he tells it like this.
oh yeah.
I wish there were some more people who did that.
Oh yeah. So yes, we tried to tell people, but they claimed the vaccine was safe and effective. So to those people who tried to claim this vaccine was safe and effective and that we were conspiracy theorists, S stands for shut the hell up.
Well, I don't know if you heard, Stephen. There was a story we're not going to cover today, but a Toronto or one of the major cities in Ontario, a doctor, a very famous, well-known, well-regarded doctor. He died during a jog. Yeah, and he was just jogging. He was just like nothing special, just doing his regular exercise, drop dead. And of course, like we hear these stories all the time, but I'm like immediately when I hear that, I'm like, yep. We all know what likely caused that. I mean, like they call it sudden. What's it called?
Sudden adult death syndrome.
Death syndrome. I'm like, yeah, it's like we don't want to call it what it is, so we're gonna make up a new.
And of course, whenever you say it's like, well, sudden adult death syndrome, rising suspiciously, and deaths in the 18 to 50 crowd rising by 40%. Oh, that seems pretty suspicious.
Something's not right.
Something's not right, but it's not the vaccine.
Yeah, it can't be the vaccine. Nothing. The vaccine is glorious and beautiful. You must kiss it.
Yeah. S stands for shut the hell up. Back to the story, the study, which sought to shed light on reports of unusual menstrual bleeding after receiving the SARS-CoV-2 vaccination, surveyed more than 39,000 adults online after they were double vaxxed against the virus. Found that 42% of people with regular menstrual cycles bled more heavily during their period after having the vaccinations than they had previously. And further found that some people who do not usually menstruate, such as those on long-acting reversible contraceptives or gender-affirming hormones, and those who have experienced menopause, reported breakthrough bleeding. Study author Catherine Lee and her colleagues said the changes were not unexpected. Okay. Not unexpected those of us who were prepared.
Yeah,
but
know what this is.
Like this is, if you had been following the mainstream media narrative, you were told by this many, many times, it doesn't do this, it doesn't do this. So, generally, changes to menstrual bleeding are not uncommon or dangerous, yet attention to these experiences is necessary to build trust in medicine. The researchers highlighted that many study participants observed the changes to the menstrual cycles more than a week after vaccination, which is beyond the period when adverse symptom reporting is closely monitored during trials for vaccine reactions. The trial protocols...
Because these trials did not do that well.
No, they did not. So, trial protocols do not usually monitor beyond 7 days post-vaccination, and follow-up communications do not typically require about menstruation. Yep. So called this one.
Basically, they're like, we don't know. Actually, you know what? To be fair, we don't know would have been a more honest answer than the crap that they were giving us.
Yes.
Like, I don't know. Remember, Stephen? Like, we did like a fact check or Shrewd check, like way back when there was like that doctor, like that famous YouTube doctor, and he was interviewing somebody, some like pediatrician, no, not a pediatrician, a reproductive health like lady.
Yeah.
And she was basically saying, oh, no. Don't listen to all those like naysayers, all those like kooks. It's like this vaccine, totally safe for pregnancy, totally safe for women.
Well, they even had billboards on it.
Yeah.
Like here in Calgary, there were billboards that said the COVID vaccine does not affect pregnancy or menstruation. It's like, well,
it's like the most.
Nah, you gonna say anything about that?
Liars! What I'm saying.
Well, and trying to like, if you tried to buy a billboard, be like, did you get a COVID-19 vaccine? Do you regret it?
Call us. Yeah.
And then just have it be like the number for like the Calgary police line or something. Call us.
Well, I don't know if you remember, like at the very beginning, like when everything was really ramping up, they had a support group on Facebook for people who were like at adverse reactions to share their stories and contact.
Oh, they shut it down.
They shut it down. I forget how many people it had at the time.
Oh, like the American one had like 600,000 within a couple days.
Yeah, it was insanely large, right? And then Facebook just shut it down because they're like, we can't have you talking. Like, we don't care if you share. Like, it doesn't matter even if it's just the information is just shared in the group and just to create like a way to
a support group. No, you can't do that. No.
You cannot allow yourself to think that there's no. You're not allowed to discover that there's other people like you. You're not allowed to. You need to believe that you are alone. Like last week, Matt Walsh highlighted a story about the grown woman who dressed like a baby.
Yep.
And she went online. She found like, oh my goodness, like all these people, they're like me. And so she felt like, oh, I'm not alone. I'm normal because there's other
because there's other people that are few and far between. But with the power of the internet, then I have the ability to unite with them.
Yeah, but that was celebrated as look, this person embraced who she is by finding other crazy people like herself.
Other crazy people.
But you're not allowed to do that if you have a vaccine injury. You're supposed to suffer in silence. You're not allowed to communicate with others.
Dispute the mainstream narrative.
Yeah,
you are not allowed to do that.
It's pretty sick.
Yes, it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but things that are not sick, things that could potentially move towards making people better, is this story from Rebel News. AHS ends COVID vax mandates. This is great.
Yay!
It's rescinding the immunization of workers for COVID-19 policy effective July 18th, 2022. As a result, workers will no longer be required to be immunized for COVID-19 as a condition of employment, read the email titled Immunization Policy Update sent Monday afternoon to staff at Alberta Health Services. The email was provided to Rebel News by a longtime AHS employee. So, dear staff, physician, volunteers, they're rescinding the immunization of workers. This applies to all AHS, Covenant Health, Care West, Capital One, and Alberta Precision Laboratories employees, members of the medical and midwifery staff, students and instructors, volunteers, and applicable contracted service providers. In addition, new hires and students will no longer be required to be immunized for COVID-19 upon hire or placement, while COVID-19 vaccines continue to blab. And then they just go and lie.
Yeah, then it's just propaganda.
Yeah, just a whole bunch of lies and propaganda.
Yeah.
And this is from the interim AHS president and CEO.
Mm-hmm.
So
now
here's
a quick question for you, Stephen, on this whole thing.
Yep.
So obviously the Alberta government, they're basically going the other way. They're basically saying like, you know what, we're scrapping the vax mandate like requirement, letting people just work, and like almost like they're acting like COVID is now endemic, or at least endemic. That is just like always going to be here. But the federal government is going the other way.
Yeah.
They're basically reinstating COVID protocols for travel.
Yes.
So we both know that that they're going to bring back everything like, COVID restrictions, masks, all that stuff in the fall. How do you see that playing out for provinces?
Well, it depends on, like, for right now, like, I do not know when the UCP leadership convention is occurring.
Mm-hmm.
Because Kenny is going to be in power until 2023? Until the next election?
No, next spring.
Yeah, well, that's the next election.
Yeah.
Typically it happens in May of 2023.
Mm-hmm.
Or every 4 years. And so, with that, like, the Kenny government has done nothing to give Albertans any confidence that these restrictions won't be implemented.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think they're going to re-implement these things because the federal government, just like last year, is going to push harder than ever on the provincial governments that mandates need to come back. And if they don't come back, then there'll be punishments for the various provinces. And of course, Kenny will cave like he has caved in every other situation for COVID. And because he doesn't have he's not going to run for re-election, then he doesn't really care.
Mm-hmm.
I think that when we do, if the UCP does nominate someone like Danielle Smith And I think she'll fight back a lot harder than Kenny will.
Yeah, she was sounding a lot more reasonable.
Yep.
During the COVID lockdowns. Like she's no Todd Lewin.
Yeah.
Todd Lewin obviously is like he is the man. He was like that guy in the picture at the Alberta legislature. He was the only guy in that picture who had no mask on.
Yeah.
I was like, that guy.
That guy.
That guy's like that picture you see of like it's a very famous picture of like a Nazi rally. Yeah. Where everyone in a Nazi rally is like they all got their hands up to like
the one guy who's like sitting down or something.
Nope, not me. That's what I feel like Todd Lewin was. I was like, I don't think he's going to win, but I'd love for him to win.
Oh yeah, he's great. He's great. Another thing that's great that's occurring is that there are 19 firefighters that are suing Calgary for $38 million over vaccine mandate. Yeah, so nearly 24 firefighters are taking the fire department to court over allegations of the city's vaccine mandate violating their human rights. It did. Yeah. So 19 unvaxxed firefighters are demanding $38 million in damages. There's something tyrannical with these mandates. We can't identify everybody behind it. What we can do is hold people accountable, like the fire chief, politicians, city managers. Those people are responsible for their actions, said Stephen Deba, who is leading the lawsuit. Deba has worked for 2 decades as a firefighter, was forced to resign from the department on December 8th. A statement of claim in the Court of Queen's Bench details $2 million in damages for mental stress and charter violations, as well as violations under the criminal code. By forcing its loyal employees to take an experimental injection as a requisite for employees, the city has breached its legal duty to take reasonable steps to prevent bodily harm to its employees, contrary to Section 217.1 of the criminal code. So, yep. I would say, like, if I was in charge, they would have a case, but unfortunately, the court here in Alberta has been terrible. So, unfortunately, I don't see them winning.
I'm hoping that because one of the things with the vaccines is that we're getting more and more. We're seeing less pressure from like back during the pandemic. Everyone was like it was like so important to hold everything together.
Yes.
Now a lot of that pressure has been like lifted, and there's not as much pressure to like play along with the entire pandemic narrative and all that. So I feel like courts are going to be a little bit less less pressured and more maybe willing to at least consider the evidence rather than just like no judge wanted to be the judge that kill people because we're like, what if I'm wrong? What if this is actually helping and I'm playing along and all that? But right now the pressure's off. Now you can evaluate it for its merits without the pressure of making a huge mistake that costs lives, whatever. So and plus a lot of the information about the vaccines and the ineffectiveness and the harms is really coming to light.
Yeah. So
I'm hoping that all that helps to kind of get us some hopefully good judgments in the near future. That's what I'm hoping.
We hope indeed.
We hope indeed.
What the heck was that?
Sorry.
Yep, getting some backlash here. Okay, we're good. All good. All right. So, something that also occurred because of the COVID lockdowns, they're responsible for a sharp drop in church attendance. We called this, and we've talked about this many, many times. But now it's official from Statistics Canada. They reported a sharp decline in attendance for churches and other religious services since the outbreak of the pandemic, when the Public Health Agency of Canada recommended cancelling masses and prayer meetings. Amongst the population as a whole, the proportion of people who participated in group religious activity at least once per month decreased from 23% to 19%. So 11% of Canadians 15 and older said they prayed weekly at home or participated in another personal religious practice. Some people reported that because of the pandemic, they prayed more. Their faith grew stronger. Researchers wrote on March 30th, 2020, the Conference of Catholic Bishops joined Protestant, Jewish, and Muslim leader in issuing a message to Canadians that urged people to rightly heed the precautions of physical distancing. Doctors and nurses provided us with powerful witness of care, expertise, and service in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, said the message. And members of the Christian, Muslim, Jewish, and Buddhist faith shared their personal attendance of religious gatherings, said their personal attendance declined in the first year of the pandemic amongst those who reported having fair or poor general health. The proportion of who participated in a religious activity at least once in the previous year fell from 43% in 2019 to 34% in 2020. And of course, physical bans on gatherings affected masses prompted numerous unsuccessful legal challenges by Christian advocacy groups. The Manitoba Court of Queen's Bench upheld lockdown orders that limited attendance at funerals and baptisms to a maximum of 5 people.
Mm-hmm.
The pandemic's presence in Manitoba deemed decisive action in order to reduce the spread of the virus in order to flatten the curve, wrote Chief Justice Glenn Joyal, who incidentally was our first douche of the week.
Was he?
No, he was our second. He was one of our first. The first one, the first one was the guy who was the justice here in Alberta that ordered that Artur Pawlowski had to...
That crazy order.
Yeah, he had to like say, I am going against the public health criteria, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
But Glenn Joyal was definitely one of the douches of the week.
I remember listening to the Justice Center did the full interview with one of the lawyers in that case. And I was listening to that case and like what happened there. That judge was in absolute like hack.
Oh yeah.
That guy should not be on the court because his decision was so egregious on so many levels that it was obvious that this guy made a very politically a politically problematic decision where like he intentionally avoided the evidence.
Yeah.
He ignored evidence that he didn't like, and then he put the weight of the evidence on like you need to prove that that these restrictions are not helping. It's like no. The onus is on the government to prove that they are helping.
That's called proving a negative.
Yes, and so that's the problem with our court systems in Canada. Now, you're right. Like in a lot of these major cases, like the courts were just like garbage. But we also have to remember, in a lot of cases, like tickets were being thrown out of courts because they were like violating charter rights. A lot of people did get a lot of favorable things. So it's not all one-sided. We did get a lot of like positive responses, but Canada really has a real problem with the law. A lot of government was abusing the law, but ultimately, I think that this is something we said. Like churches that basically throw their members under the bus. Like, what are you thinking? Of course, people are going to feel betrayed, and they're going to feel like you sold them out for a piece of bread or whatever. They'll give us like a handout and all that, but there will be no consequences. The main church that obviously you and I used to go to, Sesame Street, they still haven't apologized. I actually told pastors, I'm like, you need to issue an apology before you even think about the people coming back. Have you been back at all, Stephen? Since
no,
like I don't even know what their attendance is right now. I actually don't know. I'm wondering if like their attendance numbers went down.
Oh, I'm sure.
I imagine they would.
I'm sure it's probably 75% of before.
Yeah,
that would be my guess.
Mm-hmm.
So, and a quick story involving Alberta and all of this. So, Pat King granted bail, while Tamara Litch remains in jail. Online streamer Pat King has been granted bail in an Ottawa judge after spending 5 months in jail following his arrest during the Freedom Convoy crackdown. He was arrested on February 18th on 4 charges: mischief, counseling to commit mischief, counseling to commit the offense of disobeying a court order, and counseling to obstruct police. He faces additional charges of obstructing justice and perjury. Justice Anne London Weinstein announced the conditions of King's release on Monday. So to vacate Ottawa as soon as possible, no later than 24 hours, to reside with a surety under supervision until he can take a flight to Edmonton. Ottawa Police Service can check the surety's residence if required. To reside with a surety in Alberta, to be in employment under a surety, to hold no contract of communication with other Freedom Convoy leaders and stakeholders: Chris Barber, Tamara Litch, Daniel Bulford, Benjamin Dichter, James Bodder, Tyson Billings, yada yada, unless it's through counsel or for his preparations for defense for his criminal charges. No protesting or public assembly specifically tied to COVID-19 pandemic, the Freedom Convoy, and anti-government demonstration. No social media in any form, posting messages or having others post on his behalf. To abide by a curfew of 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. unless he's with sureties. He must post a $25,000 cash bond to guarantee his next court appearance. No possession of weapons or ammunition.
This is like a house arrest.
Yeah, it is.
This is not really a
house arrest for being the organizer of a protest against the government.
Yeah, so basically, just a really quick summary on this. I'm not as familiar with Pat King's situation, like the charges and all the things they have on him. Tamara Leach is for a long time has been very obvious to anyone who's followed her that she is a political prisoner.
Yep.
The government knows that even if they find her guilty of the things that they supposedly are charging her with, she would spend less time as a result of her charges that she's already spent.
Yeah.
This is an abuse of power by a government that has proven itself to be totally corrupt and totally couldn't care less about justice.
Yep.
This is why Stephen's flag is upside down, because our government is like our country is literally in a state of emergency because our government is acting like a complete dictatorship. Like Joe Rogan made that whole comment this past week. You saw that, right, Stephen?
I heard about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So Joe Rogan basically said like Canada's like effed, because we have a dictator and he's running the country like communist dictatorship. And I'm like, I think the other people can see it.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is we have political prisoners in Canada, and our government is getting away with it. This is why our country is in a really bad place right now.
Yep.
And so, if you have a chance, look up the stories of both Pat King and Tamara Leach. They're going to break your heart because these people are being railroaded. They're being railroaded by our government.
Yep.
Anyways, go ahead.
But a place that's not railroading, that's actually performing a public service by having a vote. Kansas. To hold a statewide vote on abortion since Dobbs' decision, millions of dollars pour in for both sides.
I see shades here of Bleeding Kansas. Do you know what Bleeding Kansas is?
Yep, I do.
I see shades of that. Yeah.
So Kansans will be the first voters in the nation to weigh in on the abortion issue since the United States Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade with the Dobbs decision late last month. On the ballot in the Kansas primary, which will be held on August 2nd, is a state constitutional amendment which may determine once and for all whether Kansans believe abortion is a right. Donors and organizations from across the state and across the country have poured nearly 15 million into various campaigns for the amendment, hoping to sway the electorate. Though the amendment was first proposed in January 2021, leaders on both sides say the Dobbs decision has heightened the stakes. Donations from Kansas grassroots donors remain strong throughout, but we definitely saw an uptick of out-of-state smaller dollar donations immediately following the Dobbs decision, said Ashley All, a spokeswoman for Kansans for Constitutional Freedom, a group which champions abortion rights and has spent over $5.8 million on defeating the amendment. In addition to Kansans for Constitutional Freedom, which is kind of a joke because leftists don't believe in constitutional freedom, more than 35 other organizations have filed campaign reports for this amendment, including Planned Parenthood, the ACLU, various Catholic dioceses across the state, Susan B. Anthony, a national pro-life group, the Value of Them Both Association, the leading fundraiser for the pro-life yes vote, has spent nearly $5.5 million on the campaign. Good. In total, about $10 million have poured into pro-abortion coffers, and the Wichita Eagle reports that most of this money comes from national and regional organizations. Meanwhile, pro-life groups have raised about $8 million, mostly from local organizations, including the Catholic Church. According to records, the Archdiocese of Kansas City has donated just under $3 million to the cause in the past 2 years. Other dioceses in the state have made significant contributions. What we want to do is ensure that pro-life Kansans turn out for this ballot and site of vote. Certainly, it's the first since Dobbs' ruling, but it's not going to be the last, said Mallory Carroll of Susan B. Anthony. So this should be an interesting one to watch because it's basically a referendum on abortion rights.
Well, here's like the last sentence, the one that really nails the stakes on this thing. So if yes prevails, abortion will not be outlawed. However, voters and legislators will be able to impose restrictions on it.
Oh my.
If no prevails, then abortion will be considered a constitutionally protected right impervious to restriction. So
that's crazy.
It's even if you get yes, like
that doesn't mean
that like it's outlawed.
See, I thought this was like a restriction at certain point, but I guess because this was proposed prior to the Dobbs decision being released, then they couldn't have just said, "Oh, it has to be restricted beyond a certain point." So, like even leftists. Even center of the road people should look at this and say, there's no way that we should be voting no.
I think this is a terrible idea, though.
This is a terrible idea.
I'm not a big fan of like, you know, having a referendum and on things like this, because, like, first of all, a regular person cannot actually give you a legal, constitutional justification for why abortion should be a right. If you and I go down the street and talk to a dozen people in Canada, just here in Calgary, we talk to like 100 people downtown, ask them, like, do you think abortion should be like, you know, it's a human right? And I guarantee you the majority of them will say yes. I'm like, can you explain to me constitutionally how you can make that case? And none of them will be able to tell you. Not a single one of them.
Yeah.
Because this is not a decision. This is an emotional decision. It's like, do you think dogs should we should have? Do you think dogs are good? Oh yeah, dogs are great. Like, that's pretty much the extent of of how people make decisions on this. I like it, therefore make the law, you know, like, protect the thing I like.
Favor my choices.
Whereas legislators should be the ones making these decisions and these rules.
Yes.
And I think this is a cop-out for them. It also does sound very similar to like I said, the Bleeding Kansas. So for those of you who aren't aware, Bleeding Kansas was back when, like, slavery was still a thing. Half the states were slave states. Half the states were free states. And every new state that was added had to decide, are we going to be a free state or are we going to be a slave state? That was the decision. Kansas, when it was going to be added to the American, like, you know, to the country, was a state that could either flip the country to being pro-slavery or pro-free. And so they were going to do a referendum, a vote on it, and both sides, the slavers and the free, they basically, like, rushed in, tried to, like, influence the election, and they even used all sorts of, like, intimidation tactics, and they cheated like crazy, and there was, like, incredible amounts of, like, vote tampering. It got crazy.
Yep.
And I think this could have the same impact.
Oh yeah.
Where, like, you know, we all know that the Democrats, particularly a lot of these pro-abortion Democrats, are cheaters. They have no qualms about cheating.
Oh no.
As long as it gets them what they want, and they will do it if they have a chance.
Yeah, breaking the law is nothing to them because they see it as
the
greater good.
No, truth is power, like a lot of people say.
Yes.
That's it.
But of course, this, like many other pro-life versus pro-choice incidents across the country, is only heightening the tension.
Oh, yeah.
And so this is a video from, I believe it's Created Equal. Well, it's from Rebel News covering Created Equal, of an incident that occurred of a pro-abortee committing violence against an innocent pro-lifer. So let's watch.
Something, yeah? This is my son, yeah? That's my son. Okay, you see that? Yeah, it's my son. You. Yeah? Okay?
Are you okay? Sir, you cannot say that.
You did it in my face. I fucking you not.
No, you cannot say that, sir.
Huh? Get in my face again.
It is not acceptable to threaten someone's life. And so I wanted to make sure that I got him on camera, and I also verbalized that it's not okay to say something like that. At which point he again turned around, started to make his way towards me very aggressively. As you can see, he starts taking off his backpack. I didn't know whether he was going to get a gun out of there or something like that, if he wanted to, like, fight me. I don't know. But by the time he reached me, you can see he swiped with his arm on the camera. So he ended up hitting my hand with enough force that my own video camera went flying. Thankfully, we still got the footage from the encounter, so I have filed a report with the police. Hopefully he can be identified so that he can be charged, because we should be able to peacefully demonstrate without having to worry about our safety.
Yeah. That's the kind of violence. That's the kind of aggression. Like, that's of course a physical threat of violence. That's a physical show of aggression. But if you've ever been out, like I know, Danny, you've been out a time or two, but they will threaten you with all sorts of things. if you go out there.
Yep.
And like I remember I went and helped out with Robin's ministry out by the abortion clinic, and the amount of things that you get threatened with is just ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, all we're doing is standing here with a sign saying that we want to help you out if you're in need. And just because you have a sign that says we're going to help you out because you're in need, that will get you threats against you, threats against your family, hope that you die, yada, yada, yada. Like, the pro-abortion crowd in North America and across the world, they choose violence because what they're supporting is inherently violent. A society that accepts abortion as a natural thing is a society that is increasingly prone to violence because we accept that violence to get rid of a child that is unwanted, that if somebody is unwanted, if somebody is unappreciated, that they can simply be removed from society, is a society that will accept anything as long as it supports their narrative.
Mm-hmm. And the worst part about this is that, like we've been watching, like, pro-abortion, pro-life kind of videos, so like over the last couple of years, and like the amount of attacks and violence and all sorts of really like gross things that happen against pro-lifers it's endless. Like,
yep.
I watch videos of debates between pro-abortion people and pro-lifers, and the pro-abortion people always claim that, those pro-lifers are so mean and they're so hurtful and they're so horrible, they're so like and all this kind of stuff, right? And in my head, I'm just like, are you kidding me? Like, the majority of like the violent and the really ugly confrontations are almost exclusively on the pro-abortion side. And then, as we saw like recently in the United States, we saw like what was it, like well over a dozen, if not 24, these pregnancy care centers were torched or vandalized or attacked, and no condemnations. So we're getting to a place right now where we're the people on the lunatic left, they're trying to justify they want to bring us back to the days of like lynch mobs and like back in like the segregation days, when they anybody could attack a black person and like it's totally okay because they're less than human, they're subhuman, they don't deserve any special treatment, so they can do whatever they want. And this is part of the dehumanizing process. They're trying to dehumanize pro-lifers so that you can, whatever you do or say to them, it's totally okay. And yet they have this like complete blind spot to the crimes of their own side, right? They always say like, the pro-lifers are so mean. All that. I'm like, name me one incident.
Yep.
Like one incident of a pro-lifer like publicly being horrible to another person
or commit.
And
like you try and point out, because I've been in so many discussions like this, and they'll be like, oh, like pro-life terrorists are just like they're threatening our very lives. And I'm like, name the last incident of violence committed by a pro-lifer. And they're like, it happens all the time because they're threatening women's lives. And I'm like, legitimate act of violence. Can you name one in the past 5 years? Nope. Can you name? And they're like, well, can you name an incident of violence involving pro-choicers? And I'm like,
it's again
easy.
Like easy. It's not even hard. I can probably name some like just off the top of my head.
Well, and you could name them in the past like month. It's like, oh yeah, in the past like 3 months, what has happened? Pro-life clinics have been firebombed.
Yep. And then you have like the infamous one here in Canada where like that guy basically kicked that woman, knocked the phone out of her hand.
Yep. Roundhouse guy.
There was another one that happened like really recently. A guy basically went up to these pro-life activists, and he basically was trying to show them porn.
Yep.
Trying to make the case, like, of course he's trying to make the idea that like, well, you're showing me something graphic, I'm going to show you something graphic, like thinking that was a good case. But the guy was like literally being like, he was being a bully. Like that's the easiest way to put it. But yeah, it's crazy. Like it's open season. I remember seeing one. It's a group in the States. They went to a campus, a university campus somewhere, probably a very leftist campus, and they didn't even have the graphic displays that sometimes they have. These are just generic displays of pro-life sentiments, and they had a massive crowd, like probably a couple hundred people, like just there, standing there, laughing at them, yelling at them, screaming at them. They wouldn't let them talk. They just scream at them about how horrible and terrible they are. And you're like, dang, like it almost feels like, pro-lifers may need to start getting security.
Yep.
Of some kind. Because they're not going to be allowed to protect themselves, yeah.
Well, it'll be interesting when we have the life chain in October.
Yeah.
See what happens. See if there's another incidence of motorcycle rage. We'll see.
I can only hope.
I can only hope.
Those incidents make for good drama.
They do.
Especially if they don't end up like anybody
seriously getting hurt.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Anyways, that's where we're going to end today's show. We realized it's shorter, but we've tried to dedicate Tuesday Newsday to having a select number of stories because otherwise it gets hard to follow.
Yeah.
Because it just gets ridiculous.
Well, then you don't have time to actually talk about it.
Yeah, then you're just like, this is what happened. Okay, next story.
Next story.
So we've tried to break it down to make it so that we're focusing on the important stories so that you can learn how to address these appropriately and shrewdly. Mm-hmm. That being said, if you're following us on our video platforms such as YouTube, Rumble, BitChute, and YouTube, don't forget to like, follow, comment, and subscribe because it feeds the algorithm and the big tech overlords don't like it. If you're following us on our text platforms such as Facebook, Gitter, Twitter, and Parler, and of course, follow, echo, like, subscribe, the whole thing. It's different for every platform, and I don't really care. And finally, if you're following us or listening on our podcast platforms, then do not forget to download these videos and, of course, share them with your friends and let them know how to become more shrewd. Mm-hmm. Always remember that here at the Shrewd Dudes podcast, we always like to tell you, why be rude when you can be shrewd? Have a great night, everybody. We'll see you on Thursday for our regularly scheduled live stream. Until then, have a great couple days, and as always, God bless.
Mm-hmm.